And I finally thought to myself, I'm going to take charge now. It's time to take charge because this is serious stuff. And I told him, I said, every word that comes out of their mouth is going to have a lie in it. They can't even tell you who God is, if there is a God. But I can say the word, why can't they say it? But they easily say that they're God, because that's a lie. See, the truth is there is a God. The lie is they say that they're gods. But if they talk about God, they have to call him master of universal law. So the enemy itself was telling us that there is a God.
Our projections show that by the year 2025, not only America, but the entire planet will be under the protection and the dominion of this power alliance. The gains have been substantial, both for ourselves and for you, the human power elite. You have given us entree to the resources we need in our ongoing quest for multidimensional expansion. And in return, the per capita income of each of you here tonight has grown, in this year alone, by an average 39%. And I've just received word that our forces have won a major victory. The underground terrorist network has been destroyed here on the West Coast. We are all crisis alert. The situation is normal again. But the entire planet will be under the protection and the dominion of this power alliance. The gains have been substantial, both for ourselves and for you, the human power elite.
Trump's pastor growing up was a 33-degree Mason. And this man's name is Norman Vincent Peale, and he was actually a well-known quote-unquote pastor, but he was also the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite Masonry in New York. He grew up a Methodist at first, but then he became part of the Reformed Church in America. Now, Norman Vincent Peale had a big influence because he was also a personal friend of President Richard Nixon, and then when Trump was growing up, Trump actually attended his church, and it's very clear that this man had a huge impact on Trump's spirituality. As a matter of fact, whenever Trump is asked about him, he just gushes over Norman Vincent Peale. And if you remember the famous interview where Trump is plainly asked, do you ask God for forgiveness? Are you a Christian? And what Trump does is he just refers to Norman Vincent Peale. I mean, he just gushes over Norman Vincent Peale and just talks about how he enjoyed his preaching growing up and how much he just had a huge impact on his life. And then he's just asked plainly, have you ever asked God for forgiveness? And Trump says, well, I don't do that. I don't, ask for forgiveness. I just try to just correct something if I just try to do better every day and just try to do good every single day. So,
have you ever asked God for forgiveness? That's a tough question. I don't think in terms of, I'm a religious person. Shockingly, because people are so shocked when they find this out, I'm Protestant, I'm Presbyterian, and I go to church and I love God and I love my church. And Norman Vincent Peale, the great Norman Vincent Peale was my pastor. The power of positive thinking. Everybody's heard of Norman Vincent Peale. He was so great. He would give a sermon you never wanted to leave. Sometimes we have sermons, and every once in a while we think about leaving a little early, right, even though we're Christian. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, Frank, would give a sermon, I'm telling you, I still remember his sermons. It was unbelievable. And what he would do is he'd bring real life situations, modern day situations, into the sermon. And you could listen to him all day long. When you left the church, you were disappointed that it was over. He was the greatest guy. And then, you know, he passed away, but he was a great, he wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, which is a great book.
But have you ever asked God for forgiveness?
I'm not sure I have. I just go and try and do a better job from there. I don't think so. I think if I do something wrong, I think I just try and make it right. I don't bring God into that picture. I don't. Now, when I take, you know, when we go in church and when I drink my little wine, which is about the only wine I drink, and have my little cracker, I guess that's a form of asking for forgiveness. And I do that as often as possible because I feel cleansed.
Clearly, you can see where Trump's spirituality is at because he was heavily influenced by Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. And basically what this involves is just the name it and claim it. If you can just think about it in your mind and you can visualize it in your mind, then you can achieve it. It doesn't focus anything on God, but just having faith in yourself and having faith in your own abilities. So it just takes the entire positive thinking, name it and claim it, visualize it in your mind. Why it's so wrong is that it's anti-biblical because it doesn't teach you to have faith in God. It teaches you to have faith in yourself and your own abilities. And of course, this makes sense because when it comes to, you know, Trump's arrogance, when it comes to him never fessing up to doing anything wrong, you know, according to him, he's never really done anything wrong. He doesn't have to ask God for forgiveness for anything because, you know, he's never done anything wrong. He's never sinned. So obviously that takes away from the major doctrine of Christianity, which is that we are all sinners. There is no one righteous, no, not one. We've all committed sin. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. Therefore, we have to go to God. We need a Savior. But this positive thinking theology, this name it and claim it, visualize it in your mind, all it does is just puffs up your own ego and your own pride. And of course, it makes sense why this man has such a huge influence on Trump, because that is where he's coming from. That is what he was taught growing up. And whenever Trump is asked about his Christianity, he keeps bringing this man up, a 33-degree Mason, false prophet. Now, this shyster, Norman Vincent Peale, he was heavily criticized by other theologians, other pastors, and even other psychiatrists and psychologists because of just the way he wrote his books. One of the major criticisms of The Power of Positive Thinking is that the book is full of anecdotes that are hard to substantiate. So almost all of the experts and many of the testimonials that Peale quotes as supporting his philosophy are unnamed, unsourced, and unknown. So, for example, in his book, he will say something like, a famous psychologist said this and this, or a practicing physician once said this and this, but none of that can be substantiated. So he's called out for poor references, poor quotes. He's criticized by other pastors, theologians, and even other psychiatrists. But yet, this man has a huge influence on our president. Even Peale's own father had a very interesting quote in his book, Spirits in Rebellion, and it's on page 391. And he says, he tells his son, you have evolved a new Christian emphasis out of a composite of science of the mind, metaphysics, Christian science, medical and psychological practice, Baptist evangelism, Methodist witnessing, and solid Dutch Reformed Calvinism. So his dad even admits that he takes a little bit of false doctrine here, a little bit of false doctrine there, a little bit of metaphysics, a little bit of New Age spirituality, a little bit of psychology, and just kind of mixes it up and just puts it into a big pot of, you know, false prophet stew for, you know, people to consume. And I guess people really eat this stuff up. But when it comes to, you know, the positive thinking, the positive only preacher, the preacher that won't preach against sin, the preacher that won't preach preach on hell, it reminds you of, you know, this type of preacher today. like the Joel Osteens of the world, the positive only preachers, the preachers that won't preach against God, that won't preach about God's wrath, they won't preach about sin, they won't preach about anything bad. It's just positive, positive, positive. And as they're raking in the dough, and him and his creepy looking wife and his creepy looking self. I guess just the strange part about it is that the harder they smile, the creepier they look. But nonetheless, people do eat this stuff up. But that's just a review on Trump's pastor.
And make no mistake about it, that, man, I worked for the reptilians and the Illuminati. I was an enforcer for them. I worked and I went by their rules. And some of the people that I work for, and I'm sure that Paul works for, we know that they're reptilians. We worked for the devil, and my higher ups, the decisions that were made came from reptilians. They didn't come from human beings, and so I was in a position that I had to enforce the rules of the devil. I had to enforce his rules down there, and so I know exactly what you're talking about, and as a matter of fact, there was a 4-star general that worked under there that I knew was a high priest in the Illuminati. And so all of them bases underground are Illuminati controlled, every single one of them. And they believe that the reptilians are their masters. Even though I had to kill some reptilians, some of them, listen to this. One time they made me go to New York and wait on some containers. And so we went down there, and at first I didn't realize what I was doing. And so they blocked off the street, and it doesn't matter which street it was, but they blocked up the street. And, of course, everybody had binoculars because we were all in camouflage uniforms, and all these officers, including myself, were there. And they helicoptered these containers in, and they put them in the end of the underground subways and sewage systems. And they lifted the lids up, and we were to go down there and make sure that the explosive bolts on the container exploded and let was in there, whatever they were doing out. And I was given what they call a minigun, and it's a machine gun that shoots 6,000 rounds a minute, and we had 4 of them down there. Now we're starting to get worried because they didn't tell us. And when them bolts explode, them containers open, I never got so scared in my life. The reptilians that looked like raptor dinosaurs came coming out by the thousands out of those containers, and we were shooting them as hard as we could to get out of there. And once we got out, they welded the lid shut. And they can't, these were reptilians that they called rogue. They didn't play by the rules. And in their chain of command, they were cast out.
So that goes back to Hegelian, the Hegelian effect, right? It's, you have the problem, the solution, and the solution for them is, let's create havoc, let's destroy the entire town and be very marked so the land around it is still preserved, and we start shooting the direct energy weapons out of the sky. And what's interesting about this is it doesn't affect the color blue. So this is Lahaina. You can see here in this picture, right? All that survived are these blue, and they're like plastic. They would have melted, they have a plastic component to them. They should have melted or at least burned. But because of the frequency of this fire, it's not affecting blue or deep colors of green, I believe. So what's happening in China then? Look at this. Chinese are putting blue tarps on their roofs. You can see it. I mean, in the droves. all of a sudden, all these blue roofs are popping up everywhere. They're putting tarps on top of the roof. There you go.